this is really such a symbolic day for so many people. I mean, for me, I was a born-again Christian. I have studied Zen Buddhism. I've been a religious scientist. I'm unity. I chant Hindu. I don't care how. I just want to talk to God and have God listen and just to know that I'm sincere. And I know a lot of people in this, we remember back to some of the, oh, you're going to die for your sins and things like that. And it turned us off to Christianity and Jesus. But the message is really a great message. And I want you to see some images of Easter. Remember these days? Now these are the Stations of the Cross. I don't know if you guys recognize those from church, the stained glass windows.
The flip tables.
Yeah, yeah. And these are all the things that happen during Holy Week. And I just, in looking at these, I know that it brings back memories of when I was a kid. And I'd be there and I'd get up in the morning and I'd run on out and I'd have myself a little Easter basket, or they'd give me a pail and a shovel, remember those? And I'd be there and they'd put me in an outfit, and it was like a white shirt and a red bow tie and shorts, and I'd go to church and my mom would be pinching me, quit wiggling around, and you'd have to get up and sit down and kneel and up and down, and it was in Latin. And it was very confusing, but all I could really know is because of these images, something really important happened. Because there's a guy up front that is bleeding all over the place, and there's blood, it's like blood and gore and everything, and it was so confusing, the chanting. In Catholic Church, they had chanting at the one I went to, and there was this guy with the big old incense, and he had a way of doing that, and then they'd kiss things, and they, it was just so confusing when I was a kid. But luckily, when I was 8, my grandmother decided to get into religious science, and my mom continued on. But even after being religious science, I got involved in being a born-again Christian, and I know there's so many times in my life I was down on my knees, just, dear Jesus, get me out of this. Get me out of this. And it took a whole lifetime to realize that God is always there. Always there. Now, we're going to take a look at this a little differently, and I hope that I don't get stricken down. But first of all, what I want to introduce maybe an additional concept about who Jesus was, and this is from Paramahansa Yogananda's group.
The Secret Teachings of Jesus the Yogi. How every soul can attain Christ consciousness. Extracts from lectures by Paramahansa Yogananda. The continuity of God's word through his avatars was beautifully symbolized by the spiritual exchange between Jesus at his birth and the wise men of India come to honor his incarnation. There is a very strong tradition in India, authoritatively known amongst high metaphysicians in tales well told and written in ancient manuscripts, that the wise men of the East who made their way to the infant Jesus in Bethlehem were, in fact, great sages of India. Not only did the Indian masters come to Jesus, but he reciprocated their visit. During the unaccounted for years of Jesus' life, the scripture remains silent about him. From approximately age 14 to 30, he journeyed to India, probably traveling the well-established trade route that linked the Mediterranean with China and India. His own God realization, reawakened and reinforced in the company of the masters and the spiritual environs of India, provided a background of the universality of truth from which he could preach a simple, open message comprehensible to the masses of his native country, yet with underlying meanings that would be appreciated in generations to come as the infancy of man's mind would mature in understanding. The lost years of Jesus. In the New Testament, the curtain of silence comes down on the life of Jesus after his 12th year, not to rise once more until 18 years later, at which time he receives baptism from John and begins preaching to the multitude. We are told only, "And Jesus increased in wisdom and stature, and in favor with God and man," Luke 2 verse 52. For the contemporaries of such an extraordinary figure to find nothing noteworthy to record from his childhood to his 30th year is in and of itself extraordinary. Remarkable accounts, however, do exist, not in the land of Jesus' birth, but farther east where he spent most of the unaccounted for years. Hidden away in a Tibetan monastery, priceless records lie. They speak of a Saint Isa from Israel, in whom was manifest the soul of the universe, who from the age of 14 to 28 was in India and regions of the Himalayas among the saints, monks, and pundits, who preached his message throughout that area and then returned to teach in his native land, where he was treated vilely, condemned, and put to death. Except as chronicled in these ancient manuscripts, no other history of the unknown years of Jesus' life has ever been published. Providentially, these ancient records were discovered and copied, in the Hemis Monastery in Tibet, by a Russian traveler, Nicholas Notovich. He published his notes himself in 1894 under the title The Unknown Life of Jesus Christ. In 1922, Swami Abhedananda, a direct disciple of Ramakrishna Paramahansa, visited the Hemis Monastery, and confirmed all of the salient details about Isa published in Notovich's book. Nicholas Rurik, in an expedition to India and Tibet in the mid-1920s, saw and copied verses from ancient manuscripts that were the same, or at least the same in content, as those published by Notovich. He was also deeply impressed by the oral traditions of that area. In Srinagar we first encountered the curious legend about Christ's visit to this place. Afterwards we saw how widely spread in India, in Ladakh and in Central Asia, was the legend of the visit of Christ to these parts during his long absence, quoted in the Gospel. India is the mother of religion. Her civilization has been acknowledged as much older than the legendary civilization of Egypt. If you study these matters, you will see how the hoary scriptures of India, predating all other revelations, have influenced the Book of the Dead of Egypt and the Old and New Testaments of the Bible, as well as other religions. All were in touch with, and drew from, the religion of India, because India specialized in religion from time immemorial. So it was that Jesus himself went to India. Notovich's manuscript tells us, Isa secretly absented himself from his father's house, left Jerusalem, and, in a train of merchants, journeyed toward the Sind, with the object of perfecting himself in the knowledge of the Word of God and the study of the laws of the great Buddhas. This is not to say that Jesus learned everything he taught from his spiritual mentors and associates in India and surrounding regions. Avatars come with their own endowment of wisdom. Jesus' store of divine realization was merely awakened and molded to fit his unique mission by his sojourn among the Hindu pundits, Buddhist monks, and particularly the great masters of yoga from whom he received initiation in the esoteric science of God union through meditation. From the knowledge he had gleaned, and from the wisdom brought forth from his soul in deep meditation, he distilled for the masses simple parables of the ideal principles by which to govern one's life in the sight of God. But to those close disciples who were ready to receive it, he taught the deeper mysteries, as evidenced in the New Testament book of Revelation of St. John, the symbology of which accords exactly with the yoga science of God realization.
Might be a little better. Okay. So if he was an ascendant master, maybe that's how he learned how to do that. That back in those days, if a new Buddha was born, wise people would go and find that Buddha. So I've heard this story and I thought, it's interesting to think of that perspective. I've seen it on the other side where he's the absolute God, but to see he's a man, that maybe he learned how to do that in India. And that when he came on out, they found him as an ascended master, and then later on, I mean, after they gave him frankincense and gold and all this stuff, he got to 14 and he figured, I need to go back there. But he probably already knew who he was, like so many other Buddhas, that by the time he was on those steps in the temple, talking to those wise men, and it turned out that he was smarter than any of them, that he could have been an ascended Buddha. That's the part that a lot of people have a hard time with, that maybe it came from somewhere else. So when you think about it, we need to first understand how he even got to that point before Palm Sunday. So he was able to do things like walk on water, feed people, thousands of people with just nothing, turn water into wine. I remember a few years ago, I would have loved to have been able to do that. So it's like, okay, you know. And I guess, you know, I mean, according to Hindi philosophy, we keep on coming back over and over, and we've lived here thousands and thousands of times. And each time we refine ourselves. We get better and better. And until you can walk on water, I guess you're not done yet. All right? So anyway, the dictionary defines resurrection as the act of rising from the dead. Now back then, if somebody rose from the dead, it would be amazing, a God thing. But nowadays, people die on the operating table and they're dead for quite a while, and we bring them back. And that's, you know, they get to go through this experience, this light that they see after death experiences, or you know, where they see that, and I've heard stories where they would do much better in the world because they saw the world differently. First of all, they realized it was a blessing. Maybe they weren't done yet. So it had nothing to do with the body. They just weren't done yet. Now, I've had cancer, I've had strokes, I've had so many things that I should have died from, and I've lived really dangerously. I mean, really dangerously, to the point, I mean, I went on a bicycle tour, and I was a 2-lane highway in Bavaria. One side was a 500-foot cliff, and the other side is traffic going 55 miles an hour. And I'm like, okay, if I'm supposed to die, go ahead, but I'm going to keep on going. You know, I trust you, God. You make up your mind. And I didn't go. So maybe there's something, you know, going on with the body that we don't know. That maybe it's our minds that say, oh, you're this age, so you should be this feeble. Or maybe, you know, it's because people had lived a long time back in those days because, well, maybe they're a lot more active, but or whatever. But I know of many stories of yogis. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi gave me that group gave me transcendental meditation. And there's a story that when he was of a certain age, he was in front of everybody and he says, well, I'm done. And he sat down and whew, he left his body. Yeah, he had that control. And I know a lot of the yogis that I hear in India, they have that kind of control over their body. That they realize it's just a vessel. You know, it's almost like, yeah, it's a machine that they're controlling with the spirit. And when you come to the body that way, looking at the body that way, you realize that you are much more than your body. Anyway, Bob Seema wrote these cards that I'm going to be reading off of. He really did a good job. And I chose, the first card is broken open. Life has a way of making you drop to your knees. For many of us, we get the slow burn, the just below painful state of existence that numbs rather than nourishes. We are just at the gate of suffering, yet not fully allowed to enter. The situation is hard to heal. The messages are muted and confusing. Gift wrapped with every tragedy and every unbearable painful experience is almost always a golden opportunity for rapid, exponential growth. The tragic can break you open much faster than life happening slowly over time. It is, by design, programmed into the experience. Now think back on tough times that you've had in your life. Now, when you got through them, didn't it feel like you really grew? That it's like, oh my God, I see things so much differently. These are your trials, your tests. Anyway, magic begins to happen in your life when you can, in the midst, rather than at the time, begin to see the beauty of life operating on your behalf. Now, we have to have a commitment to lean into the pain and be able to see the beauty. And I know it's really hard to have that when you're in crisis, to realize, okay, I know I can get through this. You know, I've done it so many times before. God has always been there. And to have the faith that God will always be there. Now, Jesus Christ died on the cross, but death was only the beginning. The man had so much spiritual energy that when they placed the Shroud of Turin on him, he impregnated that. And when they talk about these spiritual beings, these masters, they always talk about this halo of light around them. They could see it. They're putting off their spirit cannot be contained by their own body. It's just, and I know there's a lot of times when I have met people, you know, I've gone to some conferences and I've seen people who are of the spirit and you could just see them glow. It is really amazing. So anyway, part of that light that we see is the light that flows through all of us. There was that one quote that gal said that she could see light in everything. So the main part of this story is Jesus died on the cross. Now there's so many people who have said he was supposed to be this great God and all this other stuff, and the angels were there, and he floated up, and you know he was doing all these things. It is actually different in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. In one case, though, what I like, he was human, and Thomas came up and he put his fingers in his wounds, and he says, and he actually said, "No, I have come back and I am still alive. I am alive, not that I'm a spirit." And I know that you know that whole part. In the imagery, I felt like when I was younger, why didn't he, if he was so powerful, just float around everybody and just say, "Okay, put down your arms, you know, Roman soldiers and Pharisees and all this other stuff. I am now like a god like Ra or Shiva in the Hindu." But he wasn't. He was human. And what he has shown us by that is we are not beasts. Not just we are not this body, but we're not bound by our need to have like beastly feelings, like needing to be warful, needing to kill, needing to destroy. We are not that type of person. We are much more than this body. So the next card, it was Beyond Human. I like this one because it says, you are not the drop, you are the sea. That was the song. He mentioned that. You are a reflection back to me. You're a reflection back to God. You are basically God representing itself as you. Right? Maybe we're the eyes of God. That's why God knows everything, because he has all these sets of eyes of everybody, and God just pulls it on in. But God cannot experience you unless it's through you. It's because of that relationship that you have. Now, in talking about the resurrection, we realize that when you go through these things, it is amazingly difficult. It's scary. And I was talking to Lisette about that when she left. She left from Cuba. Now, basically, that was like a resurrection. Her whole life was dead to her there. And it was scary because she had to recreate herself, basically. She had to be reborn here in the United States and discover not only how to get around, but she's still human, so she's still dealing with those things that held her down, that made her want to leave that life. And I know that's really difficult too, because sometimes when you're dealing with things you've left behind, you wind up just having these conversations with these people that don't exist in your life anymore. And, well, if I could tell you, that was why I did this, and you have no reason to judge me that way, or how dare you, keep me down. How dare you tell me that I'm not enough? How dare you make me feel less, right? Yep. Yeah, that must have been really hard to be able to just leave. I up and left Texas. Yes, it was an escape for me. And I knew I had to transition everything. I knew, and it was very scary. And you guys have made the fact that I did this proof that I did choose the right door. So anyway, beyond human, all matter is energy. All energy is light. Therefore, you are light. This is Einstein's specific wisdom, not just a concept of New Age books. Now, considering we're headlong in being human, it is sometimes important to allow ourselves to think outside of the body, the story, the we, and into the internal aspect of ourselves. The other truth is that energy cannot be destroyed. It is refreshing to know that we are actually eternal right now, and forever isn't something for later. So just take this in. You are eternal right now. Drop the attachments to your body. Drop your attachments to your story. And imagine that you are the writer, the director, the producer, the cinematographer, the lead character of your story. And all your story really is the film that shows in front of the light. And you alter the story, the film, you edit it and you do whatever you want to it. Your story is not you. It's made of your life experiences and how you interpreted those events. Maybe it wasn't even what actually happened, but in your mind, that's your truth. And so when you look at yourself as being the light in the film, you realize that that light is always there shining through, and it doesn't matter what story is running. The light is the same. It's the light of God. Maybe the story is just here to entertain us, right? Or maybe the story is to lead you to where you need to go. I know there's lots of times where I didn't know where the hell I didn't know where I was going. I had no idea. I had no idea, absolutely. And I'd say, okay, lead me. I talk to my angels, lead me. And I've talked about angels in the past, and sometimes those angels show up as just people. You don't even realize that they're your angels. And Lisette had she knew these people for 3 weeks. They were her angels, and she moved to the United States after knowing people for
Quebec, Canada.
To Canada.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. To Canada first. Canada first. But 3 weeks. What a leap of faith. Yeah. Yeah. That would have been really scary. And only $20 in her pocket. Jesus knew that what was going to happen to him before he even went into the town on Palm Sunday. I'm sure of that. He knew. He had an agreement with God. A lot of people, kind of presume that the agreement of God was that he'd die on the cross and magically the blood would flow and wash over me and I'd be sin-free, and all I really had to do is, if I messed up, just pray and everything would be fine. I'd be forgiven. And I didn't really have to do much. It was, no work. That's why this church is a lot harder. You have to work at it. First you have to figure out what the heck is wrong with you. Or no, I shouldn't say wrong with you. What are the things that you need to work through? What are the things that you need to look at from a different perspective in order to grow? So I believe that maybe his agreement was that he had to die. He had to experience death to trust that he can come back. I mean, would you? If God said, okay, you're going to die in the most horrible, painful way, and you'll come back 3 days later. I kind of, are you kidding me? I don't think so. That doesn't sound like something I'd like to do, but that was something that he did do. And by doing it, he realized that he was much more. He needed to experience death. Some of the teachings say that he came back and he went back to Kashmir and he taught. And it doesn't really matter, any of the stories. What really matters is how you feel about your ability to turn the page and resurrect yourself.